Somewhere in Wales, there is a landfill. A regular, ugly, smelly landfill. The kind every city has, full of rotting food and broken furniture and garbage nobody ever thinks about twice. And buried inside it, right now, today, while you're watching this, is a fortune worth more than most people will earn across 10 entire lifetimes combined. Not hidden, not lost in some mysterious, untraceable way. Everyone knows exactly which landfill. There's a rough idea of exactly which section. You can pull it up on a satellite map yourself, right now, and look directly at the patch of dirt sitting on top of what's currently worth somewhere north of $800 million. And the man it belongs to, the man who put it there by complete accident, has spent over a decade trying to dig it back up, and has been told no, again, and again, and again. This is the story of James Howells, a hard drive, and possibly the single most expensive mistake any human being has ever made in one afternoon. And by the end of this video, you're going to be asking yourself the same question everyone who hears this story asks. What would you do? To understand how insane this story is, you have to go back to 2009, to something almost nobody on Earth was paying attention to. A few months earlier, an anonymous creator using the name Satoshi Nakamoto, an identity nobody has ever definitively confirmed to this day, released a strange white paper describing a new kind of digital money, one that wouldn't need a bank, a government, or anyone's permission to move around the world. Almost nobody took it seriously. It was mostly a handful of programmers and cryptography hobbyists on internet forums, trading a currency that had no real-world price at all, because nobody was willing to sell anything for it yet. It was, quite literally, internet monopoly money, except this version could technically never be duplicated or faked, which was the entire point. Into that tiny, strange, mostly ignored world stepped an ordinary IT worker in the United Kingdom named James Howells. A strange new digital currency called Bitcoin had just been created, and in its earliest days, it was worth basically nothing. Not cheap. Nothing. Fractions of a cent. You could turn on an ordinary laptop, run a program, and mine new coins just by letting the computer do math problems in the background while you watch TV. It cost almost nothing in electricity, and most people who tried it treated it as a curiosity, a nerdy experiment, not an investment. James Howells was one of those early curious people. Over several months, running his laptop's fan overtime, he mined 7,500 individual bitcoins. At the time, that entire stash was worth, generously, a few $100s. Maybe less. He wasn't sitting on a secret fortune in his mind. He was sitting on a science project that had technically produced a small pile of internet money nobody wanted yet, stored as a simple digital file called a wallet, on the hard drive of an old laptop he eventually stopped using. Fast forward to the summer of 2013. James Howells is doing what millions of people do every single year. Cleaning out a cluttered home office. Old cables. Broken electronics. Duplicate hard drives that all look identical sitting in a drawer, most of them genuinely worthless junk from years of upgrading computers. Somewhere in that pile sat two hard drives that looked nearly identical. One was truly empty, dead, ready for the bin. The other one, the one that looked exactly the same from the outside, still held the only copy in the entire world, of the private keys to those 7,500 bitcoins. He didn't back it up anywhere else. Why would he? At the time, that entire folder of coins was worth roughly the price of a cheap secondhand car. Not exactly the kind of number that makes a person triple-check their trash bags. At that point, casually, without a second thought, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, he grabbed what he believed was the dead one, tossed it into a bin bag with the rest of the clutter, carried it out to the curb, and forgot about it by dinner time. No ceremony, no hesitation, no dramatic music playing in the background of his actual life. Just an ordinary man doing an ordinary chore, about to make what may be the most expensive mistake of the 21st century, and not even realizing it for weeks. It took weeks before the horror actually set in. Bitcoin's price had started climbing, slowly at first, enough that James found himself thinking about his old mining stash again, wanting to check on it, maybe move it somewhere safer. He went looking for the hard drive. He searched the obvious places. Drawers, boxes, shelves. Nothing. Then, slowly, sickeningly, he started retracing his steps from that cleanup weeks earlier, and the memory clicked into place with the worst possible timing. He'd thrown it out. Not stolen. Not corrupted. Not hacked. Thrown in the actual garbage, weeks ago, which by now had already been collected, compacted, trucked away, and buried under fresh layers of trash at the local municipal landfill in Newport, Wales. He rushed down there anyway, hoping, praying there was still some chance. The staff explained the harsh reality of how a working landfill operates. Waste doesn't just sit in one neat, labeled pile waiting for you. It gets bulldozed, compressed, and buried under tons of brand new garbage every single day, forming layers like a nightmare version of geology. Whatever section his trash had landed in weeks ago was already gone, buried under mountains of newer waste. To really understand why this isn't as simple as grabbing a shovel and digging, you have to understand how a modern landfill actually operates. A working landfill isn't one giant pit where trash just piles up randomly. It's divided into engineered sections called cells, filled in careful layers, compacted by heavy machinery, and covered with fresh soil at the end of each operating day, partly to control smell, partly to control pests, partly because it's required by environmental law. Every single day, a new layer goes down, on top of the layer from the day before, on top of the layer before that, stacking for years, sometimes decades. Operators do keep general records of which cell was active on which date, which is the only reason anyone has any idea at all where to even start looking. But which cell was active that week is a very different thing from exact location. Within that cell alone, on that one day, there could be dozens of loads, thousands of individual bin bags, spread and mixed and crushed together by bulldozers before anyone ever mentioned a missing hard drive. By the time James even realized what he'd done, that specific week's trash was already buried under weeks, then months, then years of additional layers on top of it, each one adding more weight, more depth, and more excavation risk to whatever's sitting at the bottom. Here's the part of this story that turns a bad day into a decade-long nightmare. Bitcoin didn't stay cheap. It didn't fade away as some internet fad, the way plenty of people confidently predicted back in 2013. It kept climbing, and climbing, and climbing, in full public view, tracked minute by minute on every financial app and news ticker on the planet. In 2013, when he lost it, that stash was worth somewhere around $500,000. Painful, but survivable. Then Bitcoin crossed $1,000 a coin. His buried fortune was suddenly worth over $7 million. Then it crossed 10,000. Then, in a frenzy in 2017, it briefly touched 20,000, putting his landfill stash, on paper, past the $100 million mark for the very first time. Every single time the price spiked, headlines about the man who threw away a fortune would resurface again, and James would have to relive it publicly, all over again, watching a number he has zero access to climb higher every single year, sitting under garbage, completely untouched, completely real, and completely unreachable. At Bitcoin's highest prices in recent years, that same buried stash has been valued at close to, and at times over, $800 million. Most people, faced with an impossible situation like this, would probably give up after the first rejection. James Howells did not. For over a decade now, he has repeatedly gone back to Newport City Council, the local government that operates the landfill, formally requesting permission to excavate a specific, mapped section of the site where records suggest his trash was most likely deposited that week in 2013. Every single time, the answer has been some version of no. The council's stated reasons stay fairly consistent. Environmental permits. The landfill's operating license doesn't allow for random private excavation, disruption to ongoing waste operations, cost and safety concerns around digging through tons of decomposing, potentially hazardous household waste. On paper, these aren't unreasonable bureaucratic objections. A landfill isn't a treasure chest you can just walk into with a shovel. It's a regulated, monitored environmental site, and mishandling buried waste can genuinely create real pollution and safety risks for surrounding communities. But from James's side, every rejection isn't just a bureaucratic no. It's a no to potentially recovering hundreds of millions of dollars that everyone agrees, in principle, is technically still sitting right there. So James tried the one thing that tends to move bureaucracies. Money. Lots of it. He publicly offered Newport City Council a serious cut of the recovered fortune, reportedly proposing to share a significant percentage, worth tens of millions of dollars, directly with the local council, essentially turning down a shovel into a potential windfall for the city's own public services, roads, schools, whatever they wanted to fund with it. He brought in outside engineers and environmental consultants who produced their own assessments arguing that a safe, contained excavation was technically achievable, using specialized sorting equipment, protective containment, and even proposals involving AI-powered sorting systems to sift through the waste far more efficiently and safely than digging by hand. He wasn't asking the city to pay for anything. He offered to personally finance the entire operation himself, at his own risk, purely for the chance to try. The council still said no. Their position has remained that the environmental and legal risk and the disruption to a functioning waste site serving an entire city wasn't worth it, regardless of how much money was dangled in front of them. Money that would normally make almost any negotiation easier seemingly changed nothing here. Eventually, after years of being turned down informally, James escalated the fight into the actual legal system, taking formal legal action against the council, arguing he should have the right to attempt recovery of property that, legally, he still owns. Ownership of a specific Bitcoin wallet isn't really in dispute. He can prove those coins are his. The dispute is entirely about physical access to a specific, regulated piece of land those coins happen to be buried under. It puts in strange, almost philosophical question in front of judges who never expected to rule on anything like this. If you legally own a fortune, but that fortune is physically located inside land you don't own and can't access, who actually controls whether you're allowed to go get it? As of the most recent reporting on this case, the courts have largely sided with the council's right to control and manage its own regulated landfill site, leaving James's legal options increasingly narrow. His legal team has argued this sets a strange precedent all on its own, that in theory, a government body could simply refuse someone access to their own verifiably owned property forever, purely by controlling the land it happens to sit on, with no legal obligation to ever change that decision. Legal commentators covering the case have pointed out there's genuinely no clean, existing precedent for this exact situation anywhere in UK property law, because nobody had ever needed one before. Digital fortunes buried in physical land simply weren't a scenario any property lawyer had drafted rules for. It's one of the strangest ownership disputes modern courts have ever had to consider, and depending on when you're watching this video, it may still be actively unresolved, with James reportedly still exploring further appeals and alternative proposals rather than accepting the case as fully closed. Let's actually sit with that number for a second, because it's thrown around so casually in headlines that it stops sounding real. $800 million is enough to personally buy roughly 2,000 average American homes, outright, no mortgage, for 2,000 different families. It's more than the entire annual government budget of some small countries. It's enough to buy a majority ownership stake in most professional sports franchises around the world. If James Howells simply put that money in a basic, boring savings account earning a modest return, doing absolutely nothing else with his life ever again, the interest alone could pay him more per year than most people earn from an entire full-time career. This isn't comfortable money. This isn't even generational wealth for his kids' money. This is reshape an entire family's next 100 years' money, sitting under wet garbage, while he still has to go to work. Here's a question that even James's own supporters have to grapple with honestly. After more than a decade buried under wet, decomposing landfill waste, exposed to moisture, pressure, and chemical breakdown, would that hard drive even still work, even if he dug it up tomorrow? Hard drives store data magnetically on rigid metal platters sealed inside a casing. Data recovery specialists have said, in interviews about this exact case, that recovery is technically plausible even after years of burial, especially if the casing stayed relatively intact and wasn't crushed or badly corroded, because the magnetic data itself doesn't necessarily degrade quickly just from being buried. It's not guaranteed. Landfill conditions are harsh, acidic, and unpredictable, and there's a real chance the drive has been physically destroyed by the sheer weight and movement of tons of compacting garbage above it for over 10 years. But technically possible, seriously difficult, and absolutely not guaranteed is a very different sentence than impossible, which is exactly why James has never been willing to simply let it go and walk away. So what would a real excavation attempt actually involve? This isn't some fantasy of a man crawling through trash with a metal detector. The proposals James and his engineering partners have put forward look a lot more like something out of a mining operation than a treasure hunt. Specialized mechanical sorting equipment, similar to machinery already used in legitimate landfill mining operations around the world, where companies dig up old waste sites specifically to extract recyclable metals, plastics, and materials for reuse. Protective containment structures to control smell, runoff, and contamination during digging. In more recent proposals, artificial intelligence-powered visual sorting systems, cameras and machine learning trained to spot the specific shape and material signature of a hard drive casing moving past on a conveyor belt, far faster and more reliably than any human sorting by hand ever could. None of this is cheap. Serious estimates for a full, safe, contained excavation of the relevant landfill section have reportedly run into the millions of pounds. But against a potential payout in the hundreds of millions, James and his backers have consistently argued the math still works overwhelmingly in their favor. if they're simply ever allowed to try. As unbelievable as James Howells' story sounds, here's the part that turns it from a single freak accident into an entire hidden category of modern wealth. Blockchain analysis firms that track Bitcoin wallets have estimated that somewhere close to 20% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist, worth well over $100 billion at current prices, is sitting in wallets believed to be permanently inaccessible. Not stolen, not destroyed in any dramatic way, simply lost, exactly like James, through forgotten passwords, corrupted backups, dead hard drives thrown out during a move, or original owners who have since passed away without ever telling anyone their recovery phrase. There are known cases of programmers holding small fortunes locked behind a forgotten password, given a limited number of guesses before the wallet encrypts itself forever, literally watching a countdown timer next to millions of dollars they can see but can never touch again. James Howells isn't a bizarre one-off story. He's simply the most public, most talked about face of an entire silent epidemic of digital fortunes that exist in every sense except one: they can actually be spent. Take Stefan Thomas, a programmer living in Germany. Years ago, a friend paid him a small amount of Bitcoin as a thank you gift for making an explainer video about the currency, back when it was still worth almost nothing. He stored it on a small encrypted hard drive called an iron key, protected by a password he wrote down on a piece of paper, and then, at some point, simply lost that piece of paper. An iron key isn't like a normal computer login. It's built with a brutal security feature by design. You get exactly 10 attempts to enter the correct password. Get it wrong 10 times, and the device automatically, permanently encrypts itself, locking out the contents forever, with no override, no customer support line, no backup method, on purpose, because that's the entire point of the device. Stefan has already used up 8 of his 10 guesses. 2 attempts remain, forever, sitting between him and a stash of Bitcoin that has, at various points, been worth well over $200 million. He's publicly stated he's made peace with the idea that he may simply never try those final 2 guesses at all, because the fear of being wrong permanently is worse than the uncertainty of never knowing. Then there's the story of Gerald Cotton, founder of a Canadian cryptocurrency exchange called QuadragaCX. Exchanges like his hold customer funds in centrally managed digital wallets, and Cotton, as founder and chief executive, was reportedly the only person who held the private keys and passwords needed to access the company's main cold storage wallets, the offline vaults holding the vast majority of customer money, for security reasons. In December 2018, while traveling in India, Cotton unexpectedly died from complications related to Crohn's disease at just 30 years old. When the company went looking for the keys to access customer funds, they discovered nobody else had them. Not his executives. Not his own wife. Nobody. Roughly $190 million belonging to over 76,000 real customers was suddenly, permanently, unreachable, locked inside wallets only one now deceased man could open. It triggered years of investigations, lawsuits, and even conspiracy theories questioning whether Cotton had actually died at all or staged the entire thing. To this day, the vast majority of that money has never been recovered. In interviews over the years, James has talked openly about what it's genuinely like to live with this hanging over him. It isn't a story he tells once and moves on from. Every single time Bitcoin's price spikes in the news, his phone starts ringing with journalists again, asking him, essentially, the same question. How does it feel? He's described the strange, specific frustration of it not even being a mystery. If the hard drive had simply vanished, been destroyed in a fire, gotten stolen by a stranger, there would at least be a clean, if painful, sense of closure. Instead, he lives with a fortune that is, in the most literal sense possible, visible. A location he can point to. A value he can watch update in real time on his own phone, every single day, for over a decade, all while being told the answer is still no. It's reshaped his entire public identity, from an ordinary IT worker into the Bitcoin landfill guy. A walking cautionary tale that strangers on the internet still debate, mock, and sympathize with in equal measure, over a mistake that took him less than 30 seconds to make on one forgettable afternoon in 2013. He said in interviews that friends and even total strangers regularly ask him, half joking, half serious, whether he's checked the value today, as if he could somehow forget the exact number sitting on top of his own life, like a permanent notification he can never dismiss. There's also a quieter, less discussed side to it. The frustration of being defined, publicly, forever, by the single worst 30 seconds of an otherwise completely ordinary career, reduced in headline after headline to nothing more than the idiot who threw away a fortune. A framing he's pushed back against. pointing out that in 2013, throwing out an old hard drive wasn't reckless. It was Tuesday, so where does this actually stand today? The landfill is still there. The general area is still mapped. Bitcoin, despite wild swings along the way, is worth dramatically more today than it was in 2013, meaning the number attached to this story has only ever moved in one direction over the long run, up. James Howells has not given up, publicly stating on multiple occasions that he intends to keep exploring every legal and financial avenue available to him, whether that's further appeals, new proposals to the council, or new technology that could make excavation cheaper and safer to argue for. Newport City Council, for its part, has shown no public sign of reversing its position. And so, right now, while you're watching this video, on a random patch of land in Wales that thousands of people drive past every single day without a second thought, sits a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars, fully documented, fully real, completely legal to claim, and functionally as unreachable as if it had been launched into deep space. So here's the real question this story leaves you with, and it's worth actually sitting with for a second. If you were James, would you have ever stopped fighting for it? Would you have given up after the first no, or the fifth, or the 50th? Or would you still be down at that council office today, 13 years later, still pushing? Because somewhere under that dirt is a number that could change your entire family's life forever. There's a much smaller, much less dramatic lesson buried in here too. One that applies to every single person watching this, whether you own Bitcoin or not. Back up anything valuable in more than one place. Label things clearly before you throw them away. Because the line between worthless old junk and the most expensive mistake of your life can be thinner and closer than you think. That applies whether we're talking about a crypto wallet, an old family photo album nobody scanned a copy of, important documents shredded a little too quickly, or a password saved in exactly one place. In a world where more and more of what we actually own exists only as data, back it up isn't boring advice anymore. It might be the single most valuable financial habit nobody teaches you. And James Howells is living, breathing, decade-long proof of exactly what happens when that habit fails just once. If this story genuinely shocked you, subscribe to Money USA, because we dig up the real stories behind money that most people have never even heard of, verify every fact, and bring you the truth nobody else is covering. Drop one word in the comments right now. Would you have kept fighting or walked away? See you in the next one.